All right, good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the Rhinebeck Central School District Board of Education. It's Tuesday, June 13th. We have a motion to approve the minutes of the May 23rd, 2017 regular meeting.
So moved.
Second.
No, yes, I'll second, but
Okay,
there was one
there's an
adjustment. Yeah, there was one adjustment to the adjournment time, which has been corrected. Yes.
Okay. So all those in favor of the amended minutes? That's unanimous. That motion passes.
Clerk.
Yep. So our board clerk is on her honeymoon this week, so we're going to may I have a motion to appoint Joe Fallon clerk pro tem?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have an opportunity for public comment. Is there any member of the public that would like to make a comment at this time? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to recognition of 2016-17 staff retirees. So, would you like to begin?
What's the order in which we can?
Well, if you do yours and then I'll do mine.
Okay. We've decided to share the commendation this evening. First, I want to speak of one of our colleagues who's retiring, who is not with us this evening, but I'm very grateful to those who shared with me some of their insights into his years of service. Jeff Levinson, who has worked with and supported students, faculty, and administration in the Rhinebeck High School for 27 years. In that time, Mr. Levinson has provided expert guidance in investigating career paths, in college placement, and in applying for financial aid. He's been a friendly ear and a shoulder to cry on for students, as well as a persuasive advocate for hundreds upon hundreds of Rhinebeck students. He has a tremendous knowledge of the Commissioner's regulations. He is the unofficial historian and archivist of the Rhinebeck High School, an expert master scheduler, particularly expert at AP exam administration, and a highly skilled counselor and adolescent psychologist. And of course, all of those skills were drawn upon regularly in the high school. He has a very calming influence on students. I've certainly witnessed that with my own children and on his colleagues in the building. He's played a key role in creating and supporting the positive, nurturing, and student-centered environment that our high school is known for. And on a more informal note, from one of his closest colleagues, he is always dedicated, always professional, but a great laugh, and has a fantastic sense of humor. He apparently has saved everything work-related since 1990, but he's not a hoarder. He's always in the halls and classrooms, and as well as the lunchroom. He makes a mean pot of coffee, and of course, he will be tremendously missed. So please join me in thanking Mr. Levinson. The second person I want to thank, and she is here, is Mrs. Lipschitz, who has served in our district and with our youngsters for many years. At the start of her career, Mrs. Cole was a devoted and creative classroom teacher at CLS. And I do have to thank your colleagues for sharing some of this background on the work you've done with us. Later in your career, you welcomed change and you joined the faculty at Buckley Middle School. And your years of teaching reading at the elementary level served our middle schoolers just as well. You know just how to teach isolated reading skills to help readers improve their understanding of text and how to access information in what they read. You then found fun and creative ways for children to blend and apply those skills in language art tasks. When the middle school was trained in developmental designs, you used your years of wisdom and knew which lessons and strategies would make a difference for kids. You embraced new routines to develop positive culture in your classroom and in the school as a whole. More recently, as we all know, Common Core learning standards changed the way we all needed to think about teaching. And again, you put your expertise to good use. You attended workshops, you worked with consultants and colleagues, and you took a key role in writing the new curriculum. Throughout your career, you've always embraced new learning practices, and you know what's effective in teaching youngsters. Finally, You will most likely be remembered by many of your students for your beautifully decorative classrooms, your wit, your gentleness, your love of reading, which I witnessed in all of those book fairs, you know, which is tremendously contagious. Your influence, as I think all of your colleagues will agree, will last in eternity. Thank you so much, Mrs. Lipschitz.
So moving on to the elementary school. First of all, we have Cheryl LaCours, who was a teacher aide for 6 years and a teaching assistant for 24 years, for a total of 30 years. She is affectionately known as the child whisperer because she always has an uncanny ability of de-escalating a child in need. One of the warmest educators we have ever had the pleasure of working with, famous for always greeting students with a smile. Thank you, Cheryl, for your service to the school district. And Vicki Honer says 22 years and 8 months of service as a special education teacher. A consummate professional, one of the best teachers of reading and writing we have ever seen, extremely talented in identifying a student's need and addressing it within the educational setting in a practical, real-world way that has always been highly motivating to the students she works with. Thank you very much for your service. Someone would like to make a motion to suspend the rules so that we can enjoy cake for our retirees.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, we're suspending the rules to have cake. Okay.
Tell us, are we getting there? But it will only be one thing that we use. It won't be the thing. And the goal won't be, hey, let's get the test score up. That's not the purpose of the assessment. So that's why I try to talk about assessment this way. The demographic data, there's not a lot to remark about other than there's a couple of trends on this chart that I think are worth noting. One is that there is a declining enrollment as time goes on, and I think that's well known. And I also think that there has been a systematic increase in the number of students who are labeled low socioeconomic status or economically disadvantaged. And that's been a pretty steady trend over this data, and it shows up in that chart as well.
Harvard, what's the definition of that?
Go ahead.
The definition of economically disadvantaged, is there?
Well, there's a lot of ways to do it, but the way we do it and the way it's done mostly is students who are eligible for free reduced price lunch. So here's where we start looking at numbers on charts. So you can see that, just like I just said, that's a bunch of numbers on a chart. So if you go to 15, 16, grade 3, all the way down to 8 under 15, 16, you'll see that 46%, 50%, 31%, 30%, 54%, 57%. So what does that mean? Well, simply stated, it means the number of kids by percentage of that particular group of kids last year who passed the 3rd grade ELA test, according to the standard of proficiency set by the state education department. That's what that means. It doesn't tell you anything else. The proficiency standard, it should be noted, and this will come up again, is set based on a metric that was set some years back based on a somewhat bogus study. We won't talk about the study, but based on how well kids should do on tests in order to ensure an 80% probability that they'd get a C or better on a freshman math or English language arts class in college. And then they took that metric and backed it all the way through the system and then set cut points all the way. So you could say that they were doing college and career readiness tests in ELA on 8-year-olds in grade 3. So that should arrest your mind for a second, because you should wonder, why would they do that? Well, they're trying to set a benchmark so that you can try to understand, okay, well, this is how this group of kids is generally doing. So I just want to hold on to that thought as I move through this, and I'll move back to this in a second. So you can see that math is very similar: 45, 44, 41, 53, 51, and 37. Now, this is also setting aside the conversation about a certain number of these kids, families opted their kids out of these tests, and so we don't know which kids who would have scored proficient opted out, because I didn't study that, so I don't know the answer to that question. So just to go back to my idea about inferences from data, if I start to explain to you all the detail underneath each of these numbers, you'd start to see that you can't draw too many inferences from just looking at those numbers about whether kids scored proficient on these tests or not. And we could spend a lot of time talking about that, but it's not the use of time in this context. So I also throw this chart up only because I've actually probably will stop doing this soon enough, but it does illustrate a point, which is that special education students typically are kids who struggle to meet grade level standards, and therefore that is how they become eligible for special education. So it wouldn't be surprising if at the end of instruction in 3rd grade, for example, or 4th grade or 5th grade and so on and so forth, those students didn't pass a test that would indicate that they were on track to be college and career ready when they were 8 or 9 years old. That would be unusual because by definition they've been assessed by the special education department to be eligible because they can't meet grade level standards. Now, and that's a really important thing, and it loops back to this idea about inferencing from data. You can start to dig into this, or what we call drill down into it a bit, and make some sense out of that. Same thing is true with mathematics. You'll see that if you go up and down into the special ed kids, typically those kids struggle to meet those standards. Almost, none of them, or 1 or 2 in any particular group, will exceed that pass point that the state sets, but it's pretty unusual. As a matter of fact, we would find that remarkable if we had a student who was tested to be eligible for special education, and all of a sudden out of nowhere they start scoring proficient at grade level. That would cause us to go, okay, what's going on? Why did we get it right? It would at least cause us to question what we were doing. So that sort of confirms what we already know, if you will. Okay, so I'll just jump through these 2 charts. The only reason I put these charts in here is for my own benefit for the most part, because and it also shows you how we disaggregate this data. So if you look down that left-hand column, you'll see general education, students with disabilities, American Indian, Hispanic, and so on and so forth, all the way down. And then you'll see by cohort the numbers of each one of those kids in each of those groups. And then we tend to watch how individual groups are doing. So if you look down to that bottom line there, economically disadvantaged, you'll see that a disproportionate number of those students find meeting grade level standards difficult. And so that should be another sort of indicator that with that rise in the population of students who are in that particular disaggregated accountability group, you're going to see some pressure on those kids to not meet standards. So the combination of students with disabilities and economically disadvantaged kids has a sort of a downward pressure on how the kids do overall on these tests. Quite frankly, that is to be expected. That data actually matches what goes on in the state, as a matter of fact. So if you jump to our Science 4 and 8 tests, you'll see that in 2015 and all the way back, those tests, about 97% of those kids passed that test in grade 4, and about 96% of the kids in grade 8 passed that test. That test is a combination of a written test that assesses science knowledge at that level, and then it's also a performance test in which kids go to stations and perform a variety of scientific activities, and then those things are measured in a variety of ways. So you can see that the same kids who kind of struggled with these math and ELA tests actually did just fine on the Science 4 and 8 tests, which is an interesting observation. So you can see that that's tracked pretty much right up at the top from 99 to 100% to 97% of years in Science 4, and it's also been true in 8. So this gap here, this gap chart that I put up just basically shows the gap between how the kids did and 100%. Now, the reason that this chart exists is primarily because the No Child Left Behind Act, back in 2001, 2-ish, predicted that all school districts would have all of their kids proficient, and so they'd have 100% of their kids passing these tests by the 13-14 school year. Well, you can see that we were wildly unsuccessful all over the country, and hence the Obama administration put in place this thing called Race to the Top. And they set new standards that we would then have to meet using college and career readiness standards that I was talking about. We now have a new version of that that's called the Every Student Succeeds Act. So we now have another federal law with a new set of sort of standards and accountability metrics that we're going to have to start responding to. So this chart here will probably go the way of the dodo when this new plan comes into place. But as you can see, overall, you know, we cycle somewhere around about half to, you know, somewhere down to about a third of the kids tend to kind of motor along and pass these tests as they're coming up 3 through 8 in math and ELA, do a lot better in science. So what happens when they get into the high school and the Carnegie unit kicks in, when they're now taking Regents exams that are tracking toward high school graduation, they're accruing their 22 credits so that they can graduate and so on and so forth. So that's what we'll look at now. So if you look at the 15-16 chart far right, come down, you'll see that the Regents exams themselves are listed on the left. So if you jump just below the top line and look at Common Core Algebra 1, you'll see that 96% of the kids that took that exam passed it. If you look at Common Core Algebra 2, 98% of those kids passed that. Common Core Geometry, 97% first time through, 92% for chemistry, 80% for earth science. What's interesting about that 80% number, again, we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but the kids who comprise most of that other 20% were special education students. So if I were to put those in using the safety net that they get, which is that they pass at 55 or better, then that number would be 95%. So that's a raw number in just the kids who scored 65 or better. Common Core ELA, 97%, Global History, 90, Living Environment, 97, Physics, 98, United States History, 91. So we have a very low mobility rate. So our kids stay with us for most of their educational careers. So their numbers kind of reflected that same thing, 3 through 8. Look at those numbers there. So what gives? Well, probably what is a good way to explain that is that child development is a process, and kids develop intellectually, physically, socially, and emotionally asymmetrically over time. And so over time, through maturation, with a high support, high expectation program, they do fine. That's the answer. That's the meaning or the inference you can draw from that data. I've been telling the same story now for 10 years. It's a stable enough story that I think I'm starting to believe it for real, because it just comes up every year. And so the trick is to do what? Just be patient, support the kids, put the program out on the field. That's the best we can do. Try to keep it focused around the needs of the kids and not just think about ginning up a bunch of third grade math and ELA test scores for a bunch of 8-year-olds, because that misses the point. And we have data for 10 years to show that that's true. And we just saw it. So you can see that the Common Core ELA and math Regents exams, 96 and 97, they hover right against the top. You can see that it shows up in national tests like the Rhinebeck mean SAT scores. Again, just setting aside your sort of philosophical beliefs about SATs and where they belong or not, it's another one of those little markers that says at the summative level, when kids are older and they've matured and they've settled down, our academic program well prepares them to be successful. And all you got to do is look at 15, 16 across there, and you'll see that it changed, because I don't know if you remember this, but the SAT changed to, it was critical. It used to be in the old days it was 1600, then it went to 2400 because they put in the critical reading, math, and writing. Now they went back last year, now math and what's called evidence-based reading and writing. So we've got a new, and we're back to the 1600 thing. So we're back there now. So if you look at across the board, top 15, 16, you'll see that nationally, the overall between the two was 1095. We were on the bottom, 1153. If you look at the state, it was 1061. We were 1153. So Rhinebeck kids overall, as we would expect at the summative level, based on the narrative that I've explained, tend to do just fine as they encounter these real high-stakes exams that they sit and take. There's another indicator of this. Last year we gave about 190, I believe, AP exams. You'll see if you look at the top three there, scored 3, 4s, and 5s. So you'll see that all but, I think it's about 87% of the kids of that 190 exams scored 3s, 4s, and 5s. So you can see, like, that's really tough, rigorous coursework. It's a very demanding assessment package. There's lots of academic press in those classes, and yet the kids do fine. So these are the same kids that were coming up through our system who were motoring along like I was talking about before. I just put that in there for me just to break down each and every one of the tests by levels, but we don't have to go over that here. Another summative evaluation of the school system, 15, 16, 2- and 4-year college, 94%. Graduation rate, 93%. So, what does that tell you? Well, Rhinebeck High School is consistently on, one of the best high school lists, U.S. News and World Report. It's also on the Washington Post Most Challenging High School list most years. Our 4-year cohort graduation rate runs above 90%. College attendance rate's about 94%, and AP participation, 109 kids in the high school took 190 exams. 87% of those scored a 3, 4, 5 rank. So what does that mean for accountability in the state of New York? It means that Rhinebeck High School is a reward high school, and the 2 other schools are what we call schools in good standing, which means they're not on an accountability list to have to do a plan of some kind or another for improvement. So if you were to stop me now and say, well, what is the state of Rhinebeck Central School District on an academic level, I would say it's strong. Things are good. So the trend lines kind of go like this. Elementary science results were strong in the old regime. We have some work to do in that area, in my judgment, and we have a great opportunity to do that because the State Education Department, wisely this time, adopted some new standards called the Next Generation Science Standards, and the field will be implementing those standards over the next 3 to 5 years. And I anticipate really supercharging our science program, and particularly that will be true at elementary school as we bring that new set of standards online over the next 3 to 5 years. While the elementary and middle school math scores and ELA scores look relatively low comparatively. If you think about it as sort of like, like preparation for being in our high school and rigorous coursework, you can see that actually they're doing a great job preparing these kids for our high school, because the kids do fine. You can't make up for 8 or 9 years of instruction all in 1 year. That it has to have a strong and deep foundation, and it shows up in the assessments. Science results remain strong in the middle school, and then if you look over across from 11, 12 all the way to 15, 16, you'll see that the Common Core Algebra 1 and Geometry, 96, 97%. English Regents, again, 97%. The results in Global History, American History, Living Environment, Earth Science, Chem, Physics, and Foreign Language tend to be strong. AP participation rate is high. High participation rates in extracurricular and co-curricular and athletics and the arts. 4-year cohort graduation rate remains high. 2- and 4-year college attendance rate remains high. So we could celebrate a lot of things. The academic program is strong, effective K-12 across all disciplines. We have a strong base to build off of, I like to say. Anytime we're trying to improve, we're sort of mucking around with success. So we like to keep it that way. Our SAT scores compare favorably, of course. We offer multiple opportunities for kids. We've tried as best we can, struggling with budget issues, struggling with declining enrollment, increase in socioeconomics, any issues we've had, we've still tried to maintain a focus on academics, arts, athletics, extracurriculars, and co-curriculars. We've tried to not narrow the curriculum in some ways like other districts have had to do because of either philosophical or budgetary constraints. We've implemented, over the last several years, a K through 8 Project Lead the Way program, launched in the elementary school, Gateway in the middle. We've also now, we have Intro to Engineering and Design and Principles of Engineering. We are hopeful that we're going to be able to run a Project Lead the Way AP Computer Science course next year. So that will be a culmination of building a pipeline all these years that will end in a third high school course in the STEM area. So we're pretty happy about that. Of course, Rhinebeck High School continues to be a reward high school, named one of America's most challenging high schools. The middle school in the past has been named a reward middle school, and in fact missed it by just a hair. Again, not to make a lot out of it, because the middle school put out the same program, this year, which was strong, and we anticipate good things going forward. Chancellor, the same way, his name is good standard. So, I always try to I feel obligated to say, well, okay, so how do we grow? What do we grow? How do we do that? Well, if you look at the large bullet points up there, I know it's a little squinty because there's a lot on there. But if you think about it, the CDEP process, which we'll talk about a little more, response to intervention in the second box there is really saying, we've tried to be very specific about how we respond to kids' needs so that as they develop, we're putting the right package of services around them to encourage them to be successful. And that's kind of what response to intervention is. And that'll be an annual struggle, and you're only as good as how hard you try and how smart you are every year. You're going to keep doing that and looking for opportunities to stretch and grow and differentiate instruction for all kids. The curriculum development work, we've kind of set a standard here in this district now that there's an expectation of horizontal and vertical alignment of curriculum. That is, we don't deliver disintegrated, fragmented curriculum here. It's organized, it's focused, it's planned, it's assessed and thought about, and so on and so forth. And we'll continue that tradition. We will now take receipt this summer, officially, of new ELA math. We now have the next gen standards, we have new social studies, and the state has issued a new set of arts and technology standards. So we will be reviewing all those standards, assessing them for the purpose of doing curriculum development, professional development, assessment development, and so on and so forth, as we go into this next planning loop over the next 3 to 5 years or so. We'll try to stay focused on educating kids for the 21st century, not the 20th century, so we have to think in terms of getting them ready for college and career, and also citizenship and community preparation, because we're noticing that that's becoming much more important. and perhaps lost in the context of all these, frothy arguments about college and career readiness, and sometimes being community and citizenship ready kind of brings those other two things along. And so we're doing some real thinking about that now. Try to stay focused on what prepares kids to become global citizens, not just provincial kids, and focus on district learner outcomes that are in our plan, not just think about test scores. You'll notice that in the next one, professional development is going to be around continuing to build out for technology, and we'll continue apace with that. We've got some plans in the works for next year for things we're going to do in the area of technology. We're going to stay aligned with our standards, and we'll continue to carefully assess what the state comes up with, and we'll make our own local decisions in partnership and collaboration with the professional faculty. We're going to reinforce the importance of professional learning and collaboration, that we do things together, and we try to listen to one another and cooperate and collaborate to the extent that we can. And interestingly enough, we feel strongly about staying focused on school climate and culture. And I just sent an email around to my colleagues this afternoon. I was goofing around in my office, and when I goof around in my office, I have nothing to do. I go on the Board of Regents site and watch their meetings. So it's sort of like watching paint dry, but you can learn all kinds of juicy stuff. So I found this slide deck that was presented to them yesterday, and it was this full, comprehensive overview of doing school climate and culture work using surveys and doing social emotional learning, and this new plan that they're going to use to evaluate schools based on the quality of their school climate and whether they're doing social emotional learning, instead of just, they have this thing called the SAVE legislation and these data reports, which they're sort of like the litany of horrors. It's all the bad things that happened in your school that year. So you got to hope it's not so bad, otherwise you have to do the walk of shame and become one of the violent and disruptive schools, right? So finally, they figured out that maybe what we should do is focus on the positive stuff. Well, here's what was funny. Today in Administrative Council, we spent like an hour and 15 minutes or so talking about planning a superintendent's conference today around doing school climate and culture work, using surveys to do this kind of stuff. So we're just kind of glad state ed's catching up with us in this case. We're kind of excited about that. I'm going to have to move that to the top of the list. So, but we consider that to be a great opportunity. We're hearing feedback that it's time to focus on that, and so the academic press will continue, but the culture work will have to continue the pace. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So, any questions?
Marvin, I have a quick question. So you said earlier in the presentation when we were going through the testing numbers that those kids that don't score proficient are generally then looked at for response to intervention special education services. In your opinion, I know this isn't fair because you're not a special ed expert necessarily, or you were in a past life. But
I'm not an expert in anything.
sure you are. But I'm wondering.
Experts have targets. Any expert I ever seen.
Why do you think we come find you?
Or they're deposed to give expert testimony in court cases.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Me, I'm just a country boy from Missouri.
Yeah, I don't know. But I'm wondering if those numbers over time would be a way that we could look at projecting forward what our special education needs may be into the future, or if, as you say, once they get to the high school, they're doing fine and they're doing better than fine, they're doing really well. But I'm wondering if there are ways that we can get those disaggregated numbers to sort of look at what we can try to look into the crystal ball and see in the future. I don't know if it's fair to use data like this for that kind of project or not.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way, conditionally, it would be a good idea. The problem is the test package that the state has put out is not as useful as it might be, because it's a bad analogy, but it kind of works. if you didn't know how to swim and I just threw you in deep water, what did I find out?
Swim.
If you know how to swim. So if you put a kid who doesn't know how to do something on a test and they fail, what did you find out? What you already knew. So you have to be a lot more subtle. So that using these kinds of assessments for those kinds of predictive analytics probably isn't useful. What would be better is to use this as a broad screed to it's kind of verification data really, it's verifying what you already know, and then talk more granularly about those kids as they're being assessed and worked with in real time by special education teachers, by Emily Davison, who gets a chance to watch them, and then do some creative planning and programming for those kids. I see that Emily is thinking this way in my conversations with her, and I think right now she's, I know she walks around calm and looking all like she's like a duck, she's patting 100 miles an hour to keep up because she just took over this job and she's doing a great job. So we're going to talk more about that in the special ed part of this thing. Because it would be important to build support structures around them. And a lot of that kind of stuff, though, for special ed kids, it kind of goes on behind the scenes with through the CSE process, through staffing meetings with Emily and the principals if they're talking about what kind of classes are going to be put in place for those kids for next year, and so on and so forth. And then there's little kind of fun things that people are doing. So like, I'm going to brag about Mr. Blass right now because he did this. He made 115 instructional videos and put them up on a YouTube channel. He has over 4,000 hits on his YouTube channel.
Wow.
This guy's like a little YouTube hero or something. Very cool. And all they are is homework help things for students who need services, but also other kids are taking advantage of this. So when they're going home to do their homework, he's got it set up so that all they got to do is hit that URL and they can watch this instructional video showing how to do their homework. So a lot of what goes on for planning for those kiddos is that kind of stuff. So it's a complicated mix of things I think that have to be addressed. Also, some of those kids, it's not the academic stuff that's the problem, it's the social, emotional, developmental issues. So kids who have sort of learning disability, emotional disturbance overlays, that challenges them because a lot of it has to do with self-regulation, executive control, and so on and so forth. So they need a lot of support and scaffolding around them. So a lot of it is just kind of keeping them stable long enough so that they get to the high school and have a chance to be successful in that arena. It's kind of a complicated thing.
Yeah, no, it is.
It's good to talk about it, though. I mean, we do need to think about it.
Thanks.
So I have a question for you, and this is something that we did talk about a couple of years ago. As I'm listening to this, we do an excellent job with kids going to college and preparing them, the classes we offer. I'm still concerned about the kids that in the middle, the kids that aren't graduating. When we look at these numbers, that's an 8 to 10 kid range a year. So in our high school, there's 40 kids that won't graduate, roughly. I'm just wondering, what we should be doing better for those kids. And it's a lot of kids. It's a small number. And I think these numbers would match any district and any school. But we should be doing better for those students, I think. I'm just wondering your thoughts on those.
That's an excellent point. That's what that is. And I think that's a challenging thing to do in an environment that has so much academic press and so much push to graduate from high school, go to a 2 or 4 year college, that sort of thing. And we have seen in our industry a sort of systematic sort of taking away of all those kinds of things in this effort toward college and career readiness. And most people have always asked, well, what about the career readiness for the kids who might want to meet those challenges? And I can tell you that the BOCES Career Tech programs are trying to take this on as best they can to provide opportunities. We're seeing an uptick in numbers of kids who are interested in taking advantage of those kinds of programs. But I think in terms of programmatic offerings here, in terms of academics, I think that's a challenging thing because we've kind of pushed the program in that direction that we were talking about. So
Do you think that you know, you were talking about the social atmosphere. Do you think that we've maybe unintentionally created an atmosphere where, you know, if you're not going to college, you're feeling left out and you don't belong here? You know, maybe, you know, not that it's encouraging, but is that an unintentional outcome? Or, you know, something, I just feel like it's something that we really should be spending a little bit more time on, you know, these kids and what's happening with them. And I'm not, you know, they don't necessarily have to go to college to be successful. There's many other opportunities, but what are we doing at this level to, you know, to help them be successful in life and whenever they...
I think there may be some promise in another area that the state has opened up this thing now they're calling it pathways. And so there are multiple pathways toward high school graduation. So there's sort of a basic core of things you have to do, and then you can focus. So one is you can get a career development and occupational studies, CDOS for short, credential. And so you can do work study, you can do internships, you can do different kinds of coursework. And we're just now, this summer actually, as part of one of our summer curriculum projects, we're going to take a look at the CDOS regulations. We're going to sit down and think about that together, because the special education kids will access that, but it came up in one of the meetings I was in that, well, there'll be kids like you just talked about, who would be like, well, they'll want a CDOS credential too. They may not be special ed,
right.
They just may want a workplace experience, and so what would that look like as a pathway for them?
Right.
So we're going to explore that a little bit this summer, going to get our head around what that means.
That makes sense, because that typically was for special ed, so that would make a lot of sense.
Yeah. Well, it's nice they opened it up, so it's actually, it's not just for special ed kids. At first, when they came out with the CDOS thing, we thought it was just going to be like an old IEP diploma. Remember they used to give IEP diplomas to those kids? We don't do that anymore. So we thought that's what that was going to replace. But then they said, oh no, we're going to open this up so that you could get a CDOS credential as one of these kids that you're referring to. And so I don't know, we'll see how that goes.
We've seen that pendulum swing over the course of 15, 20 years, and it doesn't swing in the course of 2 or 3. You know, there was a time that I can remember in my career, both here and in other school districts, where occupational education was highly valued and schools were providing the opportunity. And then I'm trying to think of the Commissioner of Education, a guy from Vermont, Mills, right? And his regime shifted the whole focus. Every kid had to go to college. I mean, it became a college-focused drive, and occupational education was kind of like, well, if you can't get into college, then do that. So it kind of suppressed that interest, and I think we're starting to see gradually the pendulum is swinging back the other way, which is a good thing, because no matter what anybody in this community might tell you, college isn't for every kid, and it shouldn't be. And that may have been over the years the reason why kids weren't successful or kids dropped out or whatever. So now there's an opportunity for them to graduate with a Regents diploma that acknowledges workplace preparation. So I mean, I think that's a positive trend, but it's been back and forth over the years, depending on who's steering the ship up in Albany or at the national level or whatever.
That's a great question.
So one of the stories that I'm having trouble wrapping my brain around is looking at the elementary range of proficiencies, 37 to 57, 59 in the high. And then we jump, even though I know you were talking about how, well, it builds and it's a progression, but it really is a jump into middle school, it looks like to me, of all of a sudden they're doing much better. And I wouldn't peg 6th grade as the year kids get it all together. So I'm surprised by that, and I'm wondering, is there another explanation? I mean, are the tests comparably, is it a smooth progression of tests, or do the tests get easier? Or is there anything else? Because it really seems like a jump of a gap from the ranges at the elementary to the ranges the middle and high school.
You know what's funny about that? It used to be the exact opposite. It used to be that the kids in elementary school all did just fine, and then it dropped off in the middle. They call it the middle school dip for 10 years.
Sure.
It was sort of fascinating, yeah. And,
Or are we maybe focusing more on getting the kids ready for the tests in middle and high school? Whereas in elementary school, we hold back and say, you know what, be kids, and we're not focusing on the test.
well, I don't detect that that's so. If that is so, it's going on without me knowing. So I would say we do everything we can, we, whoever else wants to join me, to say, let's stay focused on teaching a good curriculum using the best practices we know, and let's keep working at it as opposed to thinking about testing. So I don't know. I wonder if it isn't some peculiarity of the testing itself, because I will tell you, I did this as an experiment once. This was about, I only did it once because it drove me crazy. But I sat down as a dutiful German Midwestern boy who does everything he's told to do, and I sat and took a 5th grade English language arts test. Soup to nuts from the beginning. First of all, it took me the entire time I was allocated by the test protocols. Okay, me. This may say more about me than it says. I just thought of that. Never mind. Wow, I just thought. No, and because what these tests do is they ask you to do things like this. They'll take a passage. They'll divide that passage up into 11 paragraphs and number them. Okay. Then you'll go to the questions, and it'll say, in paragraph 1, Susie said this, and in paragraph 4, Larry did this, and in paragraph 6, Bob did that. In paragraph 9, when do we find that thus and so happens that explains why those people did all that in the first 3 paragraphs? You have to go back, look at each one of those paragraphs, read it all over again. So some of this is just probably, you know, you just get used to taking these tests and getting the idea of doing a Rubik's Cube or a Mensa puzzle so that you get a sense of how to answer these questions. And so you probably get better at that, would be my guess, at these games. Because a lot of these tests are gamey in the way they ask the questions. We've had a lot of teachers sit down and try to answer some of the questions. I sat in a room with a bunch of these test questions, and there were teachers who couldn't answer the questions without checking the key to find out the answer. So that might be some of it. Some of it might be also the opt-out patterns, like which kids are in each of these grade levels that took those tests and didn't, depending upon which families made that choice on behalf of their kids. So without looking at each cohort by kid and looking at each of their tests, which I could do, it's in a database that I have, I couldn't answer the question like this because I'm not sure I know the answer. It would be pure speculation, not reasoned inferences, I would say.
Yeah.
It's a good question.
Still, I mean, it's still even thinking of, you know, that you get used to taking the tests and the gaming, gamification, well, of the test. But it's still, there's this leap that happens from 5th to 6th grade.
I don't see that. I don't know what numbers you're looking at.
So I'm looking,
This is math.
that's math.
6. But
This only goes up to 8th. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. So, no, up to high school then. You're right. It's the high school, it's
You're
not
talking
middle
about
school.
high
I'm
school.
talking
You're
about
talking
high
about the
school.
regions
Yeah,
exams,
you're right.
which
I
are later.
misspoke. Yes.
So I think that was the.
Yes, no, it's the
right,
high
is
school.
that the regions.
Right. Yeah,
is sort of a level of maturity, I mean, if I may, because that is the
So
story
then
you've
the
been
leap
telling
does
us.
happen between 8th and 9th rather than 5th and 6th. Yeah, that's my bad. Although it's still.
Where those regions can be given at different grade levels in the high school.
Ah, that makes sense.
And
Okay.
it's not the same.
Right, they're not all 9th grade.
Some of them are in 8th grade and take algebra.
Right.
Because it's
Okay.
accelerated.
They're accelerated.
Okay, that makes sense.
Some take it in
Thank
9,
you.
and actually there's a few kids who take it in their sophomore.
Yeah, thank you for catching that.
But again, I think all that stuff that I said about these tests is really important to understand as a context for these tests. I wouldn't, again, I mean, people are free to do as they please, of course, but I wouldn't make a lot out of the scores and the changes from year to year and the tracking of the cohorts. For 10 years I did that. I had a cohort tracking sheet. I tracked every kid in the district against every single test year on year on year. They were gigantic spreadsheets that I had. And I just stopped doing it because I don't have a lot of faith in the test package that they use. I'm just being
Mark, what do you think that some of that, shall we say, poor performance on the lower grade test could be because the curriculum has changed, the tests have changed, the cut points have changed. There's seems to be constant change throughout the whole system. We have kids that are not taking the tests. I mean, all of that, I think all of that kind of figures into the way the test scores come out.
When we were in the NCLB years, every single year, the kids got better and better and better and better, to the point where on the 3 through 8 tests across the board, our kids were scoring in the high 80s, 90s, to the point where we were actually thinking, gosh, by 14, 15, we actually might make it. We were thinking, wow, how does that happen? And all of a sudden they changed it, right?
I remember looking at the graphs, and we were making constant progress every year toward being 100% proficient, and then it was changed, and now we're back to 40, 50, 60% proficiency.
Yeah, I think you remember that one year I put a big black line on the chart between, so I was like, okay, just so you know, on this side it was this way because it dropped to like these numbers here. And interestingly enough, it stayed about right in this area since that drop. Such an interesting.
Also, that if you're looking for the smoking gun, that 3 through 8, and I'm going to underscore the grade levels, the 3 through 8 testing regimen is kind of built on the same model. And then what happens when they get to 9th grade? The Regents exams aren't built on that same model. So if we're looking for a potential reason why after 8th grade the scores shoot up, the Regents exams are, by and large, a more traditional testing arrangement that has been used in the state for 30 or 40 years. It's not like the 3 through 8 tests. So the tests themselves are different once kids hit high school. So maybe, as Marvin I think has implied, maybe it's the testing regimen in 3 through 8 that's the issue. And once they slog through that gauntlet and they break through in 9th grade, now they're killing it on those tests. I mean, they're killing it. And not only on those tests, but on the SATs and on AP exams, which is why we have, I think, always taken the position that it's not that we don't want to see kids do better, but maybe there's a lot of it that's out of our control because of the testing, and the data for years and years and years has been irrefutable that as mediocre as it may seem our kids do on those tests in 3 through 8, when they get to grade 12, they're blowing it out. So we're not too worried about it. We're not seeing a dip in the high school achievement. Those kids have been doing consistently well, regardless of the testing regimen in the elementary and the middle school years. So, I mean, it's a lot of interesting speculation, but I think there's some basis, in fact, of being more concerned about the efficacy of those 3 through 8 assessments, which opens up a whole other conversation.
My misreading helped.
I also think that one little thing that's important in terms of strategic planning for schools is signaling to people from a leadership position, because if you start overly paying attention to how kids are doing on tests and start asking teachers a lot of questions about why those kids aren't doing better on tests, all of a sudden test test prep books come out, and we gotta do a lot of extra prep for testing because testing is coming up, and people are shutting down the curriculum, and so now you're doing a lot of backdoor management of trying to get people focused back on what you want them to be focused on. So the signaling question is really important, and teachers pay attention to that. You know, I know a lot of people who do my line of work all over the state, and where they are focused on, you know, get the test scores up, and that is what they do. They work on tests. Some kids are in 3 or 4 ELA periods a day. They cut social studies and science out because why? Because the school's going down if the test scores go down. And that kind of signaling is a really important part of educational leadership, in my judgment. I'm sorry, I saw your hand's probably tired.
No, it's a question about the demographic data you showed us toward the front of the slide deck. And I thought it really interesting that the number overall of students since 2013-14, there have been small incremental shifts. So that's interesting to me. It surprises me, I think, because we've been dealing with ideas about declining enrollment. So part of my, I guess, thought is, well, maybe there's a cliff on, on the next 2 years in the future. But what does strike me, and I'd love your thoughts on this, and maybe this requires more extended thought, and I don't think everything you would say right now, but the leap between 2012-13 to 2016-17 from 10% of our student population being economically disadvantaged to 21% strikes me as a really important number to grapple with. And going back to the point that Diane's making about how are we supporting students who are facing challenges at home to maintain and sort of succeed in our schools is something I'd love to hear your thoughts about, but also the numbers for students with disabilities, so that 11% of our class in 2016-17 is also grappling with that. So we're actually looking at a very significant set, 2 significant sets of students in our population who have real challenges. And so thinking about maybe the shifting composition of the class. So if we move from, say, 12% of the class in 2011-12 to 21% of the class, that's a big leap. How that impacts the way we think about our academic program, supports, what kind of supports can we be offering to students to help them navigate those challenges. And again, that kind of a slight but fairly steady increase in numbers of students with disabilities, even as we may be facing declining enrollment, so that the percentages might begin to shift somewhat. I'm just wondering if you can share any initial thoughts you might have about how this could impact, because we're starting a long-range planning process now, so any kind of opening thoughts?
Yeah. Well, I think that from the academic side, looking at the Comprehensive District Education Plan, there's a lot of language in there that responds to that kind of data. You know, objectives and goals that ask questions about school climate and culture, that point us in the direction of academic planning for those kinds of kids. Because it's pretty well known in the research literature that there are strategies to better address the needs of those types of students, because they do statistically disproportionately come to school with smaller exposures to language, for example, less exposure to books. A lot of them have exposure to, this is kind of new in the literature out there, but they've been exposed to a lot of traumatic experiences of one sort or another, and that tends to delay executive function development, and so on and so forth, which correlates with student success in school. So putting together programs that address the needs of those kids. So what's interesting about school climate and culture work is dropping into the sub part of that, which is dealing with kids who have backgrounds of trauma from those kinds of experiences. There's a whole rich literature on that. There's a bunch of people. So some of my initial reaction to that is that's something we have to study to think our way through to build programs, because that's kind of new here.
Yeah.
You're putting your finger on something that's kind of new for us here. You think this is a relatively affluent community, twice the combined wealth index and the state average, or whatever it is now. But we think of it, but we don't see those kids aren't here.
And how we deploy our resources may look different from when we, had one percentage in terms of a move to a very different size population.
Well, so to just give you a little example, a little thing, Mr. King has that backpack program that he has going on over there, where kids pick up a blue backpack off the bus that has, food for the weekend that a few of the kids access. So there are, the social workers and the principals and people around that are thinking about, okay, so how do we help these kids be successful and feel welcome here? It's one way. There's a lot of ways that we do that. Great question.
Yeah, so I just want to point out, I think the students' disabilities actually is a pretty stable number as percentages. In fact, I think, right, if your numbers go up higher, you really need to pay attention to sort of how much you're looking at. Like 11 is like 13, right. But I mean, for us, it's pretty stable as a percentage. What surprised me, because I know that our percentage of students eligible for free or reduced lunch has gone up, but Tom, you've told us that a lot, but the raw number is gone up, because I've wondered if that percentage had increased as the enrollment was declining, because that was just going to be the stable number in relation to a number. Let me just finish for a minute. But that actual raw number has increased tremendously. So I would say, in relation also to, you were saying that the administrative team was discussing school climate issues, that it's always, we've always been a small district with a pretty wide range of economic resources that students have available to them, and I've always thought of that as a strength of our school system. I think, like, perhaps just like impressionistically, is that gap is greater just the way it is in the rest of the country, right? Like, it's just a little more extreme. There's less in the middle and more extreme. So around climate issues, sometimes people really just think of Rhinebeck, and people who live here who have privilege, they just assume everyone has the same kinds of access to resources that they do, and so it's an academic support issue, which is complicated too, because obviously not everyone who comes from under-resourced family backgrounds don't have tremendous abilities academically and even supports at home. They just have fewer resources, but I think it also impacts climate issues. So that was one comment. And just another thing is that I just want to always reinforce that the pride I take that we are a school system that talks about learning and growth and what our curriculum is instead of testing. That has not been an easy thing to focus on, as many of us know, over all these years. But one thing that this report shows is, as Mark pointed out, that change every, federal government at the state level, all the time, the changes that come down the pike. So I just appreciate your leadership in sticking with the value system that's about children and how they grow and how they learn, and not how well we make them do on a test.
I can answer a couple of your questions. I just did the May school lunch nutrition submittal to the state. And we had 185 people who, under the lunch program, are economically disadvantaged, either free or reduced. So it was 185. Now, the thing that's changed the most is, up to about 4 years ago, it was the responsibility of the family to indicate to the school district they're economically disadvantaged. So some people wouldn't come forward at that time.
Right.
You can still do it that way, but where we get 90% of our data now is on a quarterly basis. I have to go in and pull a database of our zip codes that we're contiguous with. We go through that. So we are now provided on a quarterly basis those who are in the SNAP program and those who are Medicaid eligible. They're automatically enrolled into our program. So we're catching a lot of kids who we never caught before because the families never wanted to come to us.
Right.
Also installing our lunch program, point of sale system is a big help along that way too, because now people just.
You don't have to identify yourself,
No, it's
yeah.
listed now.
So that's all done too.
It's my turn. I just want to go back to that, the discrepancy from the middle, the 3 through 8, and then the high school regions. I mean, I think it's fair to say, 3 through 8, we're not teaching to those tests. Our teachers don't do that. Whereas the regions, I do think, I'm not going to use the word teaching to the test, but I do think there's a focus on preparing for the regions that you don't see. So that could be part of the discrepancy. I mean, that's the nature of those classes, and that's what they do. So that certainly could be part of the impact.
Well, I will also point out, on that point, now that I'm thinking about it, that the wheels are starting. Those regencies also generate grade for the kid at the end of the course. So there's some skin in the game for Johnny or Susie to want to do, for whatever reason, to want to do well. There's no test grade for the 3 through 8 assessments that has any impact whatsoever on a kid's grade. So there is, and I know our teachers have been struggling with it, especially in the middle school, there is, and it's kind of coupled with the whole opt-out thing, that this doesn't mean anything to me. I've got no skin in the game. It doesn't matter whether I go in and just bubble in the same bubble A all the way down this paper. Doesn't really matter to me as a kid. And there are a number of kids who take that attitude. So that's another thing that may be skewing those assessment results a little differently than when you get to high school. Those tests matter. If you're going to college, especially, that transcript matters. So now all of a sudden, whoa, I may take it more seriously than I did before, because those results have a tangible impact. Just another thought.
Absolutely. As it is Regents Week right now.
Yeah, right. As we sit here watching our kids are.
Well, thank you for your attention.
Thank you.
No, next.
Isn't he up next too? Don't go anywhere. Okay, should we just turn this off?
Excuse me,
It's like
before we
blowing.
go on to the next piece of this,
I'd be
if
happy.
anybody wants to grab and food up here, now'd be a good time. I don't want to see Larry hanging around
Diane put her,
later than he has to, so I've given him the green light to start.
Thank you, Larry.
If you want something, now's a good time to grab and go and go right back to it.
Steve, were you saying you're cold?
Yes. Joe, can we
Okay,
turn down the AC?
Because I mean, we're always
it's
cold over
deep.
here, but I don't know that it goes over there.
Oh, yes, it does.
I have the TV remote, so I'll take care of that.
I don't know why you're coming back here. He's got another.
Oh, he's
got another one? Oh, I thought he was shutting everything
I
down.
just had the mental division
Taking a
at 6th
fool.
grade for middle school
He's
rather
got a
than
whole
Right,
nother
right.
high school.
Okay.
pony.
Let me know if you need more.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Look, let me need you.
And then the
No, if you need
explanations
it
make a
less
lot
cold.
more
Thank
sense.
you. I think they're chillier than we are. It's really Steve who's the baby. I've got a wrap.
I'm stupid for it.
That's what just meant today.
Our fruit bowls are getting bigger. It used to be little plates, and then we had the other little bowls.
Now we have the buckets.
Soon we're each going to get our own bowl.
The trough of fruit, yeah. It's not bad, actually. Better that than the trough of cookies.
Yeah, I'll happily eat the fruit.
High school, and these smaller cohorts of 55 kids, you're going to start to see it drop in like
Yeah.
30
Well, I
or
was
40 a year.
thinking it when I was sitting here. I was like, where's Joe? But he's back there. The clicker was over there.
Because those
Oh, we can go away from the
small
clicker.
cohorts are still in there.
Mark, are you ready to swing to the next part of the agenda?
All right, so the next thing on the agenda is Comprehensive District Education Plan with Mr. Krebs. Don't go
Did you
anywhere.
want to, sip of water or anything?
Put on your other hat. Yep,
Yeah.
sure. You got some fruit, yeah.
the both. Okay, so you have a document in front of you, which is big tab thing. It looks like this. Okay.
You gotta go in a couple of pages.
So you'll notice on the
yeah.
front of the document, there's a diagram that kind of shows how this document was made. It's built around the mission, vision, core value statement. It has three primary goal areas: culture and climate, collaboration, and student achievement, and it's all focused around improving the school system for the kids. Over the course of the last really 2 years, in earnest, we have been collaborating with multiple stakeholder groups to review and revise the mission, vision, core value statement. Once that was done, we then took a look at the district itself from a strengths and needs point of view. We took a look at the community itself and a description of the district itself. We then had a kind of a large discussion about how to backwards design plan against the mission, vision, core value document, which you'll see here in the document itself that we gave you. So that if you look in on page 4, we were asked to put a quick explanation for how we designed the document and the process itself. So I'm going to rock skip through all that. You can ask me questions if you think after I rock skip through it. So in its essence, what we decided to do was say, look, we're not going to pull a group of people, a small group of people, a CDEP team, or a few teachers, and do a planning process. Instead, we're going to do something a little more ambitious. We're going to engage with all of the teachers in the school district so that they're all involved in some direct and material way in the planning process. We worked with a consultant who a lot of us have known for years and years, and his name is Dr. Will Jager. We asked Dr. Jager to facilitate that process and collaborate with us to design a process that will produce this product that you have in front of you. How we did that was we convened a CDEP team. Those people are listed there on the front. And we met on average about 4 times a year over the course of that time period, about 3 hours a pop, to talk about how this thing is going. That group was used in a lot of different ways to give feedback into the process. We also engaged with teachers and non-instructional personnel to get them involved in planning against these 3 goal areas: student achievement, school climate, and professional development and collaboration. We basically said, okay, if we were to actually achieve mission, vision, core values by 2022, we called that a moonshot. And we said, and we needed you to help us do that. How would we do that? And we structured that thinking for them by using this, it's kind of a standard planning model. It's called theory of action planning. Basically, it's theory of action around the following statements. It's that, if we do the following thing, then the following will result, which will cause the following effect on the students in some way. We said, you go, social studies teachers, math teachers, foreign language teachers, art teachers, music teachers, whichever group it might be, go think about that, fill out some sheets for us and give some feedback about what we should be doing in your discipline. Then we kind of switched that around a little bit, and we put them in K-12 groups, and then we asked them those same questions. And then we put them back in their schools, and we asked them those same questions again. And then we asked them to thematically arrange them for us. So we did that like 4 different times, engaging fully with them, to the point where really by the end they cried onto us and looked enough. They asked us questions. We told you already what you want to do. Can we just start doing these things? It was that really, seriously, we were getting that kind of people. We said, well, I know this feels like a glacial process, but we're trying to get this thing right so we have a plan that we all support. So what you see here is the result of them handing us all of this feedback from these 4 very large meetings filtered through the CDEP team. And basically what we did was we took those documents that we got from each of those groups in the district, and we compiled them We synthesized the goals that were redundant. We had questions about goals, we went back to those folks and asked them questions about them to clarify them. And so what you see in here, after you get through the preparatory material, back to, once you jump to page 9, or 10, so page 10, that'll kind of be a good jumping off point, and that'll kind of, so you'll notice that on this page, on the left-hand side, are the 3 goals. On the right-hand side, you'll notice that there is a rationale for how we're going to operate. So this is kind of a good summation, so I'll slip your authority for a second and just read it to you so we kind of get on the page of how this document is structured and why it is the way it is. So the CDEP long-term goals and objectives are posited as theories of action calculated in place that perceive and emerging gaps between the district's current state and the vision for the future as articulated in the district's mission, vision, core values. So you see, that's a fancy way of saying what I just said, right? Only it's a little more dense, a little more terse, and says, you know, look, we put a bunch of theory of action statements in this that says, hey, in academics, if we were to achieve our goals, the mission, vision, core values, what would we be doing? Well, that's what those goals and objectives are inside from those stakeholder groups. So, you know, reading on, you'll see that the CDEP long-term goals and objectives will be continually analyzed, and student progress will be monitored annually using multiple measures approach. The goals and objectives will be adjusted as the information becomes available. So what does that mean? Well, the first version means this. These goals are theorized. Okay? They're as an itinerary. In other words, this is the plan for how we're going to move forward together. As we go forward, though, those may prove to need to be changed for whatever reason. But in a collaborative process, by looking at multiple measures, we'll be reviewing and revising them. And the CDEP team will kind of be the group that is the intermediary between the professional faculty and this process. So they'll be the ones where we get information as we go along. So if you go through, the next part of this was that the 3 goals were predicated on really 2 big ideas. And this is an important point to linger on this moment, which is that all of the Rhinebeck K-12 students, personnel, instructional programs, and pupil services will be engaged in achieving the aims and purposes defined in the board's mission, vision, and values statement. Well, what that's saying is everybody's involved. And we're not going to do a plan unless people are involved, because we don't want anybody politely declining the opportunity to cooperate and opting out on us. We want everybody to work with us. So part of this is an all-in strategy. And then the next part of it is that we need to develop a set of mechanisms to monitor the progress of the students and refine or develop as we go along. So if we see emergent needs, like we just talked about here at this table, we talked about some emergent needs that we see. So what we would do is take some of these goals that we have thought about how we might address that. We'll try some of those things, see if they're actually doing what we hope it'll do, theorizing, using a theory of action, and then we may have to change them. But for now, what you see in front of you is the best thinking we could do up to the moment where we're sitting at a CDEP meeting back on the 24th, and everybody kind of went through this thing, and everybody said, okay, is this document in a place where it's good enough to guide our action in a meaningful way? Did it reflect the thinking of the people that were involved? And so on and so forth. And that group at that table came to consensus in real time and said, yeah, we're there. We're ready to give this thing a try. And so going forward, these goals now require additional work. So we've already started talking, for example, administratively, about prioritization of these goals, scoping them, because it's a 5-year plan. This thing runs out to 2022. There's a lifetime's worth of work in here. So that's got to be planned, and we've got to start setting priorities in year 1. So we've already started talking about, okay, so 17-18 is year 1. What is going to be the focus of our activities? And then what do we do with the rest of those goals in terms of when do they officially start to have plans put in place to implement those goals? So we'll be focusing on some things in the near term and then planning in the medium and long term to bring online the rest of the goals that are in there. So I think that's a quick, I just summarized a lot of stuff, so I know I left a lot out. I think that's a good summation. I would say that part of the work going forward will be now to loop back to each of these groups. So let's say high school math department. They've got some goals. So we'll sit down with them and say, okay, these are the goals that you wanted us to work on. So let's talk about what we need to do in order to implement those goals going forward. And so they'll be involved with the measurement of those goals, with the implementation of the planning. If it's professional development, then they'll be working with us to arrange that professional development so that it satisfies them. And we'll be doing that across all the disciplines that show up in here in that statement. That's sort of how, well, that's how all of the, if you will, the white space becomes completed as part of the plan. So this document is a plan, and it's also a plan for plan. Right? Because it's got a 5-year, it's at least got a 5-year life in front of us from where we sit today. That's what it is.
Laura?
Can I just add, though, Marvin, that yes, it's a 5-year plan and it's a plan to plan, but because of those theories being revisited, with luck, it's not going to have to be a redo in 5 years. It's going to continue to live and evolve because nobody on the team ever imagined that this was, okay, that looks pretty and let's put it on a shelf and see where we are in 5 years. So the part of this is that it will continue to be a living, breathing document and updated annually.
One of the things worth noting in terms of structure, you'll notice that in the first part of this document, there is no evidence of student achievement data. It's in an appendix unto itself. What's going to happen in that data section is that will be built out over time. So when we do school climate survey in the fall, we'll get a data packet back that gives us information about school climate. That will now become a part of that appendix. So the slide deck that I just did, we'll put that in the appendix, and any other information that we think is relevant to whatever we're working on will now become a part of the appendix to this document. Another thing that, now I return the machine off, I can show it to you, let's look at it. We have archived every single artifact from this process, and it's on the district's website behind the password protected site, so that all of the professional faculty that participated in generating this document can just log in and find all those artifacts. So we're sort of, until we run out of electrons, we're going to archive all of our work and continue to build this document out over time as well.
Questions or comments about the CDEP? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Marvin.
I just
go ahead. Sorry,
wanted, I mean, I've been fortunate enough to sit in the curriculum committee and sort of have a lot of conversation with Marvin and with Laura, who really are the people on this, who speak to this group, who know the most about this process. And I just, again, want to thank you for the transparency with which this work has been conducted and the responsiveness with which conversations in the curriculum committee have gone back to that group, and really both been amazing communicators in terms of sharing with us the process and helping us to understand why it's so important and how inclusive it's been.
Joe?
Yeah, I'd also like to point out to everybody that that we've, in order to get this thing moving, because some of our summer curriculum development projects intersect with this. Some of the things that we're already planning for the fall and beyond for this coming year are connected with this. We have it, I have put it on your agenda for tonight for approval. So I would just, if there are questions, I would appreciate your asking them of Marvin while he's here. Once you let him down the road, then that will potentially shelve this for another 2 weeks, and have him come back for another session. So I just, he's here now. He's really the guy who knows this backwards and forwards. So if you have any questions that might link to your ability to vote this one way or the other, please take the opportunity to ask him while he's still here and awake.
Jack?
What does LOTE stand for?
Languages other than English. Thank you. Oh, there's lots of acronyms.
Yeah. Welcome to the world of acronyms.
Gotcha.
Oh, we got a lot of those.
Any other questions? All right, thank you, Barbara.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good rest of your evening.
You bet we will.
All right, so we'll move on to board committee reports. First up is CDEP.
Do we think we need to go through that?
I was going to suggest we don't, but I'll let your colleagues decide that.
That's true, it's up to them.
It's fine. Yeah, we're good. We're good.
All right, we'll move on to Rhinebeck Collaboration.
Okay, so I'll start that. As I had let you know at a prior meeting, Mark and I attended the first meeting of the reconstituted Rhinebeck Collaboration with Gary Bassett, our village mayor, Rick Lewitt. Got there kind of late, but he did make an effort to get there, from the village board, and Elizabeth Spinzia. She did not bring another town board member with her. But we sat down, and it was a very informal conversation. It was, given that it was our first meeting, it was, one of those, getting to know you moments. We all held hands and sang. But we did talk about some very real issues. We spent quite a bit of time talking about safe routes to school, sidewalks, crosswalks that are obviously not the school district's direct concern, but something that we're interested in. We can't paint crosswalks, we can't hire crossing guards or put up lighting or whatever, but we're certainly very concerned about the ability of our kids to walk on sidewalks where possible. So we talked about that a lot, and I think suffice it to say that certainly the village trustees are very concerned about the walkability of the village, not only for students, but for other people. So again, we didn't make any decisions, but that was one of the issues that we rolled out on the table at that meeting. Another thing that we discussed, which certainly is going to have an impact on all three municipalities. We did have a discussion led by Elizabeth Spinzia about the fact that the town of Rhinebeck is looking to do a property reval this fall. It's been 12 years apparently since the town has done a reval, and there are, as Tom knows full well, as do they, that there are properties that are very underassessed. Properties that have been assessed at $300,000 that are selling for $1 million. So, there are issues connected with that. The whole assessment process, the fact that there are currently elected assessors as opposed to assessors who are hired by the town to do that work, and the quality of the work that results from elected versus appointed or contracted assessors. So we talked about that for a good period of time. Anything else that you can think of?
And there was some discussion about the county initiative to
the shared services
initiative.
Yep.
There was also discussion about, shared services between the 3 municipalities. We talked about fields a little bit because of projects that are coming up both in the town and the school district.
Yeah.
So I think other than that, we've pretty much covered it all.
Yeah, we have our capital project coming up, which is going to impact the availability, and the long-range view is the suitability of our fields, but also taking them offline for a period of time. I know we've heard this for many years, but the town is engaging in field work down at Thompson Mazzarella Park. So we started that discussion about how can we share, and actually I was really pleasantly surprised with the initiative regarding that conversation from Elizabeth, right. Asking us what fields are we going to need, what can we do to help you guys out during the transition. We talked about using Stone Church as a possibility during that transition period. So we've already started that conversation, which was a good one to have. So I thought it was a helpful conversation. We're scheduled to meet again, I think, in the last week in June. So we have another meeting on our schedule, and we're going to try to meet every 6 weeks or whatever, and keep the ball rolling and see if we can accomplish some things again, or at least have good conversations about things that concern most, if not all, of our municipalities. So it was a great start, and I appreciate the participation of the town and the village elected officials. It was great. Kind of like old times. Kind of like old times.
Deirdre?
Well, just thanks to both of you for getting that going again, providing the leadership and the organizational oomph to have it get going again.
Keep you posted.
Other questions? All right, we'll move on to the Long Range Planning Committee.
Okay, that's me. The subcommittee, the Long Range Planning Subcommittee, had an organizational meeting, and the members, as you see, are Laura, Diane, myself, and Joe and Tom. We talked about how might this group sort of begin the whole process and then open out into more consultative and sustained engagement with invited guests, the other committees of the board, because we actually sort of foresee that pretty much every committee is going to have a point of connection with the things we'll be discussing in long-range planning, and ultimately to the broader community. Whether we sort of have targeted discussions and a couple of set dates where we invite people to come in and speak with us in the way that we did with preparation for the capital project is one thing we're discussing. We talked about the need to begin thinking very concretely about a multi-year financial plan, enrollment projections, and of course coordinating all of those things with the work that's emerging out of CDEP. There's absolutely no reason for long-range planning to get involved in duplicating or talking about issues that are already really capably and for a long time being addressed by CDEP. So happily, Laura is involved in both groups, so her presence is really important. We touch a little bit on the opportunities that Tom and Joe have been having for learning more about shared services, and Tom was heading off to ASBO as we had our first meeting, so we'll be bringing in ideas from those sources as well. For instance, Tom talked about the cohort survival method that he's been working with, and there are other methods that can be employed that he wants to explore through connections with those colleagues. We also discussed the importance of communicating fully and regularly on the work of the long-range planning group. So finding a dedicated space on the website and having the communications committee really sync its efforts with what's going on in this group is absolutely top priority. Right now, we're in what we're calling a fact-finding phase. First of all, what can we really see about the enrollment projections, not only in terms of 3 years, but 5 years and 10 years? What are the different instruments that are available to us to sort of begin to develop that picture? Can we forecast any trends in terms of special ed? These are important things for us to think about, and how then can the financial plan be created against that kind of forecasting activity? That's going to be crucial. Secondly, we want to begin to understand how departments are organized so that we have a kind of a full awareness of the structure of each of these parts of the district long before we get involved in looking at, very concrete suggestions, as we have done at budget time in the past. And we are going to invite different administrators and department heads in to kind of talk with us about those things, so we really understand the current organizational structure. And thirdly, who are our statistical neighbors? I like that term. I mean, we have neighbors in neighboring districts, but really what districts look like Rhinebeck? What sorts of ideas are emerging from their challenges with enrollment patterns? And Tom is beginning to help us think through those issues with identifying a cohort for those kind of comparison purposes. Of course, we recognize that when we talk about all of these issues, we need to hold firm our mission, vision, and core values as a district, right? What is it that's unique and distinctive about us in Rhinebeck? And not just in terms of our understanding as a board or in the district, but also more broadly in our community. What are our important values? That's a large part of what we're going to be continually asking ourselves. So again, the kind of questions we're going to invite people to talk with us about. For instance, we've invited Brett King to come in and talk to us about Chancellor. How is our staff currently organized, and help us to understand something about that structure today? How do we articulate the challenges that we're anticipating in the face of declining enrollments? And thirdly, what is the vision for the future, the positive vision for the future that can emerge from this kind of, taking stock and talking amongst ourselves as a community about a way forward? That's what we accomplished. We're planning to meet every 2 weeks. We have 2 dates on the books. One being, I think, the end of this week.
28th. Well, we have to talk about that.
We have to talk about that. We have a prospective one this week. Yeah. And we definitely have one on the 28th.
That's correct.
So I'd just like to reiterate that I know that there are members of the community out there who would like to get involved in this committee. So I think it's really important that we reach out and invite people to attend these meetings, because we don't want people to feel that they're being excluded from the planning for the future.
Very good point.
Any other questions or comments for the Long Range Planning Committee? Okay. Move on to the updated draft 2017-18 Board of Education meeting schedule.
Okay, I'll try to be quick. It's in your packets under 4.5, based on a poll of our 2017-18 board members. As has happened frequently, there are rare Tuesdays where 7 people are available. However, there are a few. July 11th, everybody has indicated to me that they are available, as that they appear to be on August 29th. Looks like we'll probably need to run a 3-meeting schedule this summer, just because a number of the Tuesdays there isn't even a quorum. We also need to space them out because there are things that need to be done. For example, having the board accept the tax levy and set the tax rates has to be done, but it can't be done before we get that information from the towns. So we are hoping that we will have that information by August 8th and be able to set the levy and the tax rates then. However, there's a possibility that if one or more of the towns aren't able to provide us with that information by the 8th, we may have to cobble together a quorum of the board at another day. It doesn't have to be a Tuesday. It doesn't have to be in the evening. Actually, at that point, any time that we can get at least 4 of you together to do that work, and likely that work only, we'll have to do, because we have to get that information to the county. Tax bills have to be printed up, back to us, stuff to be mailed out. So we're going to see if we can make it happen by August 8th, but we may have to schedule an additional, maybe a short side special Board of Education meeting to take care of that if the 8th doesn't happen.
Joe, I just want to make, because I think you first said August 9th, and I strangely have August 9th written in my calendar. We're talking about August 8th, right?
Is that a Tuesday?
Tuesday?
Yeah, that is.
Yeah, did I say August 9th?
You did. I had it written down August 9th, which is, so I don't know.
Yeah, no, we're talking about
But
Tuesday.
we're talking about the 8th.
So if the 8th is a Tuesday, then that's
It's
the
the
date we're looking at.
okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry for any confusion there. So it's pretty critical for us to know when we're meeting for the summer. The rest of the year's board meeting schedule is there. You will adopt this entire document as one of the things you'll do at the organization meeting on July 11th. But we need to kind of set up when we're going to be meeting during the summer to do the business that we need to do. So, do I have any questions especially about those 3 summer dates?
Not specifically about these 3 dates,
Yeah.
they're all fine for me, but our workshop
Well,
date
that's-
and
Yes.
how you are hoping to try to accomplish
Well,
that.
I mean, that's quite frankly a significant problem, because I don't think any of the other Tuesdays, all 7 people were available, and I've pretty consistently expressed my view that I think having a goal-setting meeting or a retreat for another purpose or some combination thereof without all 7 board members there really is, I don't think is wise, because somebody either feels left out or they don't have their voice at the table. So we're going to have to look at perhaps a date other than a Tuesday or a time other than an evening where we might be able to get all 7 people who will be on the board for 2017-18 to say, yeah, I can carve out, 3 hours or half a day. So those of you who've been around long enough know that we've done these like for a morning. We 9 to noon and get done what we need to get done, and then we're done. So I wanted to get this taken care of first, because these meetings have to happen. So my next job will be, before I totally snow you under with emails, will be to send out the next set of emails to say, okay, we're looking for another day and time when everybody's available to set a date for that. So that's like the next phase of, but we don't have to accept that as part of this document. That's a special meeting. So stay tuned.
Okay.
Okay. All right, that's all I have on this item.
All right, move on to good news.
Well, the track team had terrific success at
Yeah,
state.
yeah.
So congratulations to those young women.
And they're amazing coaches.
Other good news? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to old business.
I guess I have a few. We have a personnel meeting and a finance meeting scheduled for this Thursday. Tom and I have talked, and we think that as long as we can get the members of the finance committee there, we should probably have that meeting. I mean, there are a few items that we need to that we want to roll out to the board sooner rather than later. So my inclination is to keep the finance meeting on our schedule for this Thursday. Personnel, since we're in this process of getting dates nailed down for going forward with our negotiations with the Rhinebeck Teachers Association, I'm not sure at this point that there's another task, and certainly there's nothing related to that right now until we get dates set and have another meeting and find out where we're going. So I would suggest that we cancel our personnel meeting this Thursday unless you guys in the personnel meeting committee have a reason that we should meet. But that's just my suggestion at this point. That's how it looks to me.
Did we want to relook at our list or not? I know Tom had some things he wanted to think about. Or do we need to talk about that before we meet with David?
Or we could talk about that, you know, when we meet with him the hour and a half before we meet with whenever that first meeting is going to be. And I'll ask David about that. We could always reschedule it. It looks like we're pushing into like the second week in July at this point, so we'd have time if we need to do that. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, and somebody else mentioned it, that this is the month of conflicts, and we're talking about we're trying to schedule a long-range planning meeting as Deirdre had mentioned, and one of the suggestions was to see if it was acceptable to hold a long-range planning meeting on Thursday morning in lieu of the communications meeting that is scheduled for Thursday morning that had been rescheduled for another date. So I'm reluctant to bump other people's meetings, but that's like, I think that's the only chance before we're scheduled to meet again on June 28th that we can probably schedule another meeting. So I'll leave that to your
It's okay with me.
to your pleasure. I didn't want to disappoint Deirdre, but having given us the green light, we can meet Thursday morning.
Okay.
Wait, what time are we talking about?
8 o'clock.
8 o'clock.
But then we cancel personnel, and then you have finance.
If you have not been on a committee with this lady right here, get used to 8 a.m.
8 a.m.
It's good. Just make sure you've got your coffee and everything. And then
Yes.
it's good.
Or not, dear Diane. You can veto that, and then we're back to bringing Deirdre onto campus.
Just contemplating, is it better to have, meeting, 2-hour break meeting, or just bang them back?
Yeah.
But
Well,
you can't go back,
right.
right? You have to go, it has to be at 8. So that's fine, so just do that.
All right, so we're canceling personnel?
No, we're canceling personnel,
Yeah.
but that's later in the morning.
I'm not
We're
saying
canceling
okay.
communication
So
and having long-range
sliding
planning.
long-range planning, okay.
So 8
So
a.m.,
it's
okay.
Okay.
long-range planning, nothing, and then finance at, like,
Yeah.
whatever time you're meeting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that's all the old business I have.
Unless finance can be earlier, is that better, or no?
It opens up a hole in my
Because we don't have
schedule.
personnel, so that's all.
Yeah,
I'm aware.
I don't think.
Oh,
I
you're not
can
here
meet any
anyway.
earlier.
That doesn't work for you, Mark?
No.
All right, that's fine.
all right, so let's just leave it. Okay,
What about at 6?
I like driving. I like driving on Slate Quarry.
I can make it at
8 times a
6.
day, no problem.
you gotta be awake to have that conversation. Okay,
All right, we have another opportunity for public comment. Is there any members of the public that would like to make a comment at this time? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to other. I have a couple of items.
okay, go for it.
One is the Thompson Mazzarella Park Committee. As you know, I represent the school district on that committee. Very good news is that bids have been awarded for the construction of the pavilion, so they expect that the pavilion will be under construction by the end of this month.
Oh, wow, that's great.
And also there's a development in the second phase for the parking for the fields, so hopefully that'll be under construction in the fairly near future.
Is that the pavilion replacing the one that's there now by the?
No, it's a new building that is going to house restroom facilities for the park.
Mark, can I just ask you a question?
Yes.
Probably just because of the whole turf and not turf, but why are the pavilions and the parking coming for the fields? Is that just?
Well, the fields are being
logistical?
developed by the Field Partnership, which is a collaboration of the baseball and soccer leagues, and the field part has actually been moved back into phase 1, which
That's good.
So that'll be under construction also at the same time, but the town planning board has said it's okay to build the fields, but they cannot be used until the parking is finished. So, you know, there's a whole
Okay. Got it.
phasing of things that have to be done, but the good news is that it's going to be underway soon. So.
Good.
And those fields will need growing seasons too.
Right, they'll have to
so
grow for 2 years.
It's not a bad thing.
Maybe that'll line up with our.
And my other item is the convention. I know Joe mentioned it in his notes for the meeting. The NYSBA convention is October 12th through 14th. We should decide whether we want to attend. I would recommend that we do. I don't know who's available or not, but we should try to make reservations because there's limited hotel space.
Yeah, you get a hotel room in Albany and you're driving up to Lake Placid. I mean, there's not a lot up there. So I don't know how they're going to pull it off, quite frankly. But the sooner we make a decision and get a reservation, the less we'll be driving every morning from Ogdensburg to Lake Placid or Old Forge to Lake Placid. It's a drive.
I know it's a week earlier than last
Yeah,
year.
it is earlier than it's been.
Something that always trips us up a bit is the postseason fall sports. Could you
Yeah.
send Steve an email and ask him if he typically has these dates already?
I will ask him.
It's not New York City, it's not as easy to get back to.
Yeah.
Remember, I had to go back and then like return them.
Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
I'll ask him, and I'll let you know. I'll try to get that out to those of you for whom that may be a concern tomorrow, if I can. And again, I would heartily suggest that any of you who would like to go, let me know within the next, if possible, within the next couple of days, because I think June 15th is when the registration opens, and those rooms will go.
So for the benefit of our new board members, I'd highly recommend that you consider going if you think it'll be available. It's a great opportunity. I plan to go, so put that on the record.
Please send me an email if
I
you're
will.
planning to go, so I have something in writing. I gotta rely on this brain.
And also, the Dutchess County School Boards Association is planning, instead of having a hospitality suite like they've done in years past, offering dinner for the county school board members who attend the convention on, I believe it's Friday evening. Okay, that's all I have. Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to note that the article, Joe, that you shared with us, that had been in the Poughkeepsie
Oh,
Journal,
yeah.
I think, from the Albany Bureau about that Moody's actually mentioned Rhinebeck as an example. It was just interesting to
attention.
see our experience sort of validated in that.
Yeah. I thought it was a pretty good, straightforward example of why we're in the situation that we're in, in kind of layman's terms. I think most people who read that can kind of wrap their heads around that, and I intend to keep that handy for when we visit our legislators this coming year and say, here's the reason, guys. This is the problem. This is what you still need to help us fix, and there's a bunch of ways you could, but that's it right there. So it was actually good that it came out.
Yeah.
Any other? All right, move on to our action items. Is there anyone who would like to remove an item from the consent agenda? All right. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes.
All right, don't run away too fast. I'm your clerk pro tem. So.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to grant tentative approval per Board of Education policy number 4351 for an international trip to the 17th World Summit of Nobel Peace Laureates in Costa Rica, Central America, from March 1st through 3rd, 2018, to be sponsored by the Model UN Club.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Diane?
Thank you for your email, Joe, the questions. I just want to, this is the second year they're doing it, just make sure that the people that are interested, the way the funding will work is laid out very clear to anyone that's interested. Just say now that they've kind of gotten 1 year under their belt about it.
Yeah, and as that, so I'll just kind of rehash my response to your email. They raised, a good chunk of money. Each student who traveled this past year cost them / their parents around $850 for their, they raised like $19,000. Their intent is to do it the same way again. They did have some money from the fundraised amount set aside for students who had financial need, who would not have been able to go otherwise, and they did. And this was administered by Mr. Moore and the two teachers who went as chaperones on that trip, and two students got a scholarship, and it still had to pay like $150 or something like that. So that's how it worked out.
Another question, just from what you
Yeah.
said. So I know they wanted to start fundraising right away. Last year they wanted to start as soon as possible. So I guess want to make sure that when they had to apply, the kids had to apply and kind of interview to go.
Yep.
So fundraising wouldn't happen before that, because we wouldn't want kids that are fundraising like that have any bearing on the application process to go on the trip. So would that process happen before they start fundraising?
They want, well, I can't speak specifically to the question about when the fundraising will start, but they're anxious to get the application process going, which is why it's on your agenda to give tentative approval so they can start seeing how many students are interested.
I guess the fundraising's through the club, I guess, so
yes,
it doesn't
and
matter.
yes, but I don't know whether they're planning on starting that now or waiting until the fall. I mean, they started a lot later last year, so even if this gets approved tentatively tonight and they start fundraising in the fall after the members of the contingent are selected, they're still months and months and months ahead of where they were last year. So, okay.
Deirdre?
Yeah, just in relation to the conversation we had earlier about the number of students who are economically disadvantaged. I mean, the 2 out of, I thought 18 went this year.
Yeah, I think it was 17 or 18.
Isn't really proportional. Not that that number has to be, but I just think the communication in the school community to students and parents that this trip can be, you can apply for financial aid and financial aid is available, is very important, because even just knowing about the trip, if you don't have the money and no one's telling you you absolutely may be eligible for financial aid, people just don't think that they're going to even participate in an application. So I just strongly encourage that communication be made very clear and consistently.
That's a good point.
Sure. You'd expect a higher number of kids to have gotten financial aid based on that.
All right, other questions? Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve summer 2017 curriculum, program, and clerical work per the attached list.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Diane?
It's kind of related to 2 items. Might be the long-range planning committee in my head, but Joe, I kind of wanted to ask you about, I guess it's a little bit about the process. So we have an agenda item for new classes that are going to replace, new electives that would replace electives that didn't have high numbers. But there's also summer curriculum that is directly, that we'd be paying for, that's money that's related to these classes. But we don't have numbers for these classes. So in essence, we could get to the end of the summer and that class wouldn't happen, but we've paid for curriculum work for that class.
Yeah, I talked to Marvin about that because he and I met actually yesterday morning to go through this entire list. And if we decide not to run a new class, then we're not going to pay somebody to develop a curriculum for a class that's not going to be held. So we'll know by next board meeting what's, at least we'll have an idea what's going to run based on the enrollment, because that's when we make those decisions at our next board meeting. So if there's something that's not going to run, then we won't be paying them to develop curriculum for
So just for my
such a course.
clarification, so, I mean, those numbers were based on kids that went to their counselor and said, yes, I'm interested in taking that. But then that won't be put into their schedule until the end of the summer, right? So
Well,
it may or may not fit.
It's earlier in the summer that it goes into the schedule.
Before then.
I mean, they can change their schedules anytime between when they get the schedule mailed to them in late August up to several weeks into the start of the school year. I mean, we'll have to make some guesstimates based on the numbers that we have at our disposal in 2 weeks. I mean, there's no other way to do it.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
I wish there was a way we could look into the future and know for sure, but
Yeah.
there just isn't.
Yeah. Okay.
Other questions? Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the 2017 through 22 comprehensive district education plan.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on that, EDEP? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of team leaders and advisors for Bulkley Middle School for the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the proposed additions to the Rhinebeck High School program of studies beginning with the 2017-18 school year.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the elimination of 2 full-time 1.0 FTE instructional positions, elementary teacher and teaching assistant on the basis of attrition effective July 1st, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve an extension of the leave request from Shannon Denise, having commenced on January 13th, 2017, and extended through June 27th, 2018, with such leave to be taken as unpaid medical leave through that date.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award from the Rhinebeck PTSO in support of funding for the grant as submitted by Chantel Collins in the total amount of $98.78 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept the donation of 19 pair of softball uniform pants from the parents of the 2017 girls modified softball team.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to accept a grant award from the Rhinebeck Science Foundation in support of funding for the Project Lead the Way teacher training for computer science principles course as submitted by Justin Randall in the amount of $8,581.46 as stipulated.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? So I'd just like to thank the Science Foundation and the parents of the girls modified softball team and the PTSO for their generous donations. Okay, all those in favor? That's unanimous, that motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the voluntary resignation of Michelle Lavatsky from her position as elementary teacher, conditional upon her appointment to the position of special education teacher assigned to Chancellor Livingston Elementary School, and her subsequent 4-year probationary appointment to the position of special education teacher, effective September 1st, 2017, in the tenure area of special education at a salary of Step 5 MA plus 6, $66,991 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve an extension of the appointment of Deborah Verde as a long-term substitute in the position of elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School at the pleasure of the board, having commenced from the original period January 4th through June 23rd, 2016, through December 23rd, 2016, and now through June 22nd, 2018, at the salary of Step 11 Masters, $78,513 in accordance with the 2016-17 RTA salary schedule. This appointment extension is to fill the vacancy created by the leave of absence granted to Shannon Denise, elementary teacher at the Chancellor Livingston Elementary School.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. May I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve as a first reading the consideration of modifications to board policy number 5300, district code of conduct.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Laura?
I have a question, Joe, on page 18 of the code of conduct, number 41.
Okay, let me get there, just give me a sec. Yep.
It looks like you're striking number 10.
Correct.
Which is teacher removal for a behavior
Yes.
from a classroom. Can you
Yes.
explain?
Yeah, one of the things that was noticed by actually one of the parents on the ad hoc committee is that's the only item in this entire list of consequences that has that particular notation. And we, sitting around, we all agreed that probably many, if not most of these 50 items could potentially result from a teacher suspension. Teacher suspension from a class is a typically unusual thing, doesn't happen very regularly, and there's by law there's a pretty rigorous standard that needs to be met for a teacher. Now, this is for a teacher, not a building principal, to suspend a kid from a class or classes. So it was the recommendation of that committee that that we just strike it from that particular item, which is not to say that that a teacher couldn't suspend a student for a host of these other 50 items, not all of them. For example, a teacher would not suspend a kid from their class for parking in an unauthorized area, or, I mean, there are some here where that just would not be in the wheelhouse of a teacher, but many of them are. So instead of going through and adding 10 to each one, and also not to encourage teachers to start taking on the responsibility of suspending kids from their classes. I mean, again, it's something that I think the state law tries to downplay by making it, I mean, teacher has to jump through a lot of hoops in order to even bring that kind of suspension about. It's limited in the amount of time they can do it, that the committee felt that instead of going through and tagging 25 or 30 of these 50 things with that, it would be better just to strike that one and not even go down that road.
So just for clarification, if the number 10 reads removal from classroom by teacher, are you talking about suspension from the classroom, or just I'm sending you to the principal?
Well, that can be done, and it doesn't, yeah, I mean, that is done not infrequently, but that reference is removing, like, you can't come to my class for the next 20 weeks.
Okay, so maybe a suggestion would be that, you know, because the way I read it, it was removal from classroom. I thought you were just going down the hall. Maybe it's suspension from classroom by teacher, just for consistency and clarity.
Okay, I'll get some feedback on that,
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, all those in favor?
This is a first reading, by the way, so, won't be finalized until next meeting or whenever the board wants to vote on it for the second time.
That's
Okay.
unanimous, that motion passes.
All right.
All right, may I have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the extension of the appointment of Chelsea Leahy to the part-time .8 FTE long-term leave replacement position of grade 7 science teacher assigned to Bulkley Middle School, which became effective September 1st, 2016, and now extended through June 23rd, 2018, at a salary of Step 2 MA $60,445 prorated equals $43,356 in accordance with the RTA salary schedule for 2016-17.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of the following individuals to the positions in accordance with the RTA salary schedule 2016 as follows. David Airstock, Health and Wellness Coordinator, $4,687. Carolyn Peck, Central Treasurer, $2,586. Stephen Boucher, Athletic Director, $7,039.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the following resolution. Be it resolved that the Board of Education of the Rhinebeck Central School District hereby creates one full-time 1.0 FTE non-instructional position of interpreter for the hearing impaired in the civil service competitive class effective September 1st, 2017.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. We have a motion upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the appointment of Whitney Drucker as clerk of the board effective July 1st, 2017, per the annual non-unit salary schedule.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. That motion passes. And may I have a motion to move into executive session for the purpose of the discussion.